In 1970, archaeologists in Romania discovered something extraordinary in a cave called prehistoric, the Cave of the Old Woman. They found human remains. Female. Estimated age at death between 70 and 80 years old. And she died approximately 10,000 years ago. 70 to 80 years old. In 10,000 BC. That's older than most people lived until the 20th century. We imagine prehistoric life as short and brutal. Nasty, brutish, and short as philosopher Thomas Hobbes described the natural state of humanity. We think early humans died young. Killed by predators, disease, starvation, violence. Life expectancy was 30, maybe 35 if you were lucky. But here's what the data actually shows. If you survived childhood in the Stone Age, you had a decent chance of living to 60, 70, even 80 years old. The short lifespan myth is based on a statistical trick. Average life expectancy includes all the infants and children who died young. But if you made it past 15, you could easily live into old age. Today, you're going to discover what life was really like for our Stone Age ancestors. How they survived. How some lived till 80. And what killed most of them before they got there. This is the untold story of aging in the Stone Age. And it will challenge everything you think you know about prehistoric life. Let's start by destroying the biggest myth about prehistoric life, that everyone died young. The average versus reality. When scientists say average life expectancy in 10,000 BC was 30 years, what does that actually mean? It means if you add up everyone's age at death and divide by the total number of people, you get 30. But here's the problem: infant and child mortality was catastrophically high. Estimates suggest 40–50% of children died before age 15. Many didn't survive their first year. When you include all those infant and child deaths in the average, it pulls the number way down. But those who survived childhood? Their prospects were completely different. The real numbers. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer populations, both modern groups and skeletal remains from prehistoric sites, have found a surprising pattern. If you survived to age 15, your life expectancy jumped to approximately 54–58 years. If you survived to 30, you could reasonably expect to live into your 60s or even 70s. A 2007 study analyzing skeletal remains from multiple Paleolithic sites found that about 5–10% of individuals lived past 60 years old. That doesn't sound like much, but remember, these are people living 10,000–30,000 years ago. No hospitals. No antibiotics. No modern medicine. And yet roughly 1 in 10 reached what we'd consider old age. The oldest evidence. The oldest definitively aged prehistoric human remains show remarkable longevity. The Old Woman of prehistoric, 70–80 years old, died around 10,000 BC. The Shanidar Cave remains, Iraq, multiple Neanderthals who lived to 40–50 years, one possibly older, from 35,000–65,000 years ago. Dom v Stonis, Czech Republic, a burial site from 26,000 years ago with individuals aged 40–60 plus. These aren't anomalies. They're evidence that living to old age was difficult but possible. Why the myth persists? Why do we think prehistoric people died young? Several reasons. Infant mortality skews the average dramatically. Hollywood depictions show constant violence and short, brutal lives. Victorian-era anthropologists portrayed savages as inferior, including shorter lifespans. The reality is more complex. Childhood was incredibly dangerous, but if you survived it, you had a fighting chance at a long life. To understand how anyone reached 80 in 10,000 BC, we first need to understand what killed most people before they got there. And the answer is childhood. The first year. The first year of life was the deadliest. Estimated infant mortality rate, first year, 25–40%. 1 in 3 orphan babies didn't survive. Why? Multiple dangers. Birth complications, no medical intervention. Difficult births killed both mother and child. breech births, umbilical cord complications, hemorrhaging, all potentially fatal. Infections, no antibiotics. A simple infection could kill. Babies are immunologically vulnerable. Malnutrition, if the mother was malnourished, breast milk quality suffered. If the mother died, the baby often died unless another nursing woman could feed it. Accidents, babies are fragile. Falls, exposure to cold, accidental suffocation. Predators, in some environments, predators could smash unattended infants. Ages 1 to 5. If you survived the first year, danger continued. Weaning was a critical period. Transitioning from breast milk to solid food exposed children to waterborne pathogens and foodborne illnesses. Diarrheal diseases caused by contaminated water or food killed enormous numbers of children. Without modern rehydration therapy, severe diarrhea is deadly. Respiratory infections, pneumonia, bronchitis. In cold climates, these were major killers. Malnutrition, if food was scarce, seasonal variations, failed hunts, environmental changes, children suffered first. Accidents, young children exploring their environment. Drowning in rivers, falling from heights, burns from fires, injuries from animals. Ages 5 to 15. Risk decreased but didn't disappear. Children at this age began contributing to group survival, gathering plants, helping with food processing, learning to hunt. This introduced new dangers. Injuries during learning to hunt means handling weapons. Accidents happened. Violence, in some groups, violence including from within the group was a risk. Diseases, childhood diseases without modern immunity or treatment could kill. Who survived? The children who survived to adulthood had several advantages. Strong immune systems, they'd survived early infections, building immunity. Physical resilience, natural selection favored the strong. Those with genetic advantages survived. Social support, children in groups with strong social support, attentive parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents had better survival odds. Environmental luck, being born in a good year, plenty of food, mild weather helped. By age 15, you'd already beaten odds that killed half of your birth cohort. You were a survivor. And your chances of reaching old age were now much better. So you've survived childhood. You're 15, 20, 30 years old. What could kill you now? Violence and warfare. One of the biggest killers of adults, other humans. Evidence from skeletal remains show significant rates of traumatic injuries, healed fractures, blade marks on bones, skull injuries. Some estimates suggest 10–20% of adult deaths in some hunter-gatherer groups were due to violence. This included interpersonal violence, fights over resources, mates, status. Raiding between groups, competition for territory, revenge cycles. Homicide, anger, jealousy, disputes. Men faced higher rates of violent death than women, likely due to participation in hunting, defending territory, and intergroup conflicts. Hunting injuries. Hunting large animals was dangerous. Imagine hunting a mammoth, bison, or wild boar with stone-tipped spears. No guns. No metal. Just wood, stone, and courage. Injuries were common. Goring by tusks or horns. Trampling by large animals. Falls while pursuing animals over rough terrain. Infections from wounds sustained during hunts. Many skeletal remains show healed fractures, evidence that people survived serious injuries. But many others didn't. Infections and disease. Without antibiotics, infections were deadly. A cut could become infected. Without treatment, sepsis could kill within days. Dental infections, abscesses from broken or decayed teeth could spread to the bloodstream and kill. Parasitic infections were common. Worms, flukes, protozoa. While not usually immediately fatal, they weaken people over time. Diseases spread through groups, especially during winter when people lived in close quarters in caves or shelters. Childbirth. For women, childbirth was a major risk. Maternal mortality rates were likely 1–2% per birth. That sounds small, but consider if a woman had 5 to 6 children, her cumulative lifetime risk of dying in childbirth was 5–12%. Complications that are survivable today: hemorrhaging, obstructed labor, infection were often fatal. Environmental hazards. The environment itself was dangerous. Cold, hypothermia and frostbite in winter. Especially dangerous for the elderly and injured. Heat stroke and dehydration in hot, dry climates. Drowning, rivers, lakes, oceans all posed drowning risks. Animal attacks, large predators, cave lions, cave bears, wolves occasionally killed humans. Starvation, seasonal food scarcity, failed hunts, environmental changes. When food ran out, people starved. What protected adults? Despite these dangers, many adults lived into old age. Why? Experience and skill. Adults knew how to avoid many dangers. They hunted smarter, traveled safer, recognized dangerous situations. Social cooperation. Groups shared food, protected each other, cared for the injured. Adaptability. Humans are extraordinarily adaptable. When one food source failed, they found another. Physical fitness. Adults in hunter-gatherer societies were incredibly fit. Strong cardiovascular health, lean muscle mass, functional strength. This protected against many modern diseases. So how did someone live to 80 in 10,000 BC? What did it take? Genetic luck. First, you needed good genes. Strong immune system, ability to fight off infections without antibiotics. Robust cardiovascular system. Heart disease was rare, but genetic heart defects could still kill. Cancer resistance. Cancer existed prehistorically, but at lower rates. Still, genetic predisposition could be deadly. Mental resilience. The ability to endure psychological stress, trauma, loss. If you had genetic vulnerabilities, chronic conditions, autoimmune issues, cognitive impairments, your odds of reaching 80 were much lower. Avoiding violence. You needed to avoid being killed. This meant good social relationships. People who got along with their group had protection. Outcasts or disliked individuals faced higher violence risk. Conflict resolution skills, ability to de-escalate disputes, negotiate, maintain peace. For women, this was slightly easier. Men faced higher violence rates. But women weren't immune. Avoiding accidents. Careful, experienced individuals lived longer. Avoiding risks, knowing when to avoid dangerous hunts, treacherous terrain, risky river crossings. Physical awareness, maintaining strength, flexibility, balance into old age to prevent falls and injuries. Staying healthy. Diet and lifestyle in hunter-gatherer societies were, in some ways, healthier than modern diets. Diverse, natural foods, meat, fish, nuts, seeds, berries, roots. No processed foods, no refined sugar. High physical activity, constant movement maintained cardiovascular health, muscle mass, bone density. Intermittent fasting, food availability was cyclical. This may have had health benefits. Low chronic disease rates, obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease all much rarer. However, acute diseases, infections, parasites were constant threats. Social value. Importantly, reaching old age meant your group valued you enough to care for you. In your 70s or 80s, you couldn't hunt. You couldn't gather as effectively. You were physically slower. But you had value. Knowledge, decades of experience. You knew which plants were edible, where water sources were, how to predict weather, where animals migrated. Childcare, grandparents could care for children while parents hunted and gathered. The grandmother hypothesis suggests post-reproductive women increased grandchildren survival. Teaching, you pass skills to younger generations: tool making, fire starting, tracking, medicinal plants. Social cohesion, elders mediated disputes, maintained oral histories, provided wisdom. Groups that cared for their elders had evolutionary advantages. Elders were repositories of knowledge and experience. The Old Woman of Romania. The woman found in Terra Muirila lived to 70-80. Her remains show severe arthritis in her joint. She was in significant pain. Healed fractures. She'd survived injuries decades before. Worn teeth from a lifetime of chewing tough foods. Yet she lived. She was cared for. Her group valued her enough to support her through years when she couldn't fully contribute physically. Her survival was not just biological. It was social. Even if you reached old age, something eventually killed you. What ended the lives of Stone Age elders? Infections. Without immune systems as robust as in youth, infections became deadly again. A respiratory infection that a younger person could fight off could kill an elder. Dental abscesses, skin infections, gastrointestinal infections, all potential killers. Injuries and falls. Bones become brittle with age. Falls that a younger person could survive became fatal. Hip fractures, in particular, were often death sentences. Without modern surgery, a broken hip meant immobility. Immobility led to infections, blood clots, starvation. Starvation. When food was scarce, elders often ate less to ensure younger, more productive members survived. This was sometimes voluntary elders choosing to sacrifice. Sometimes it was communal decision-making. In harsh winters or droughts, the old and the very young died first. Chronic conditions. Arthritis was common and debilitating. Severe arthritis could make movement impossible. Cancers, though rarer than today, still existed. Without treatment, they were always fatal. Heart conditions, genetic defects, valve problems eventually caught up. Vision and hearing loss made navigation and survival harder. The final decline. Most likely, Stone Age elders didn't die from a single cause. They died from accumulation, a combination of reduced mobility, chronic pain, weakened immune system, and finally an infection or injury they couldn't overcome. But they often died surrounded by family. Their knowledge had been passed on. Their grandchildren carried their wisdom. In that sense, they achieved a form of immortality. Reaching 80 in 10,000 BC wasn't common. But it wasn't a miracle. It required genetic luck, careful living, avoiding violence and accidents, maintaining social value, and having a group that cared for you. About 5–10% of people who survived childhood lived into their 60s or 70s. A few made it to 80. The myth that prehistoric people all died young is exactly that, a myth, created by misunderstanding averages. Childhood was the great filter. Half of children died. But if you survived, you had a real chance at a long life. The Old Woman of Romania, living to 70–80 years old, proves that even in the Stone Age, with no modern medicine, no hospitals, no antibiotics, human resilience, community support, and accumulated knowledge could carry someone to old age. She survived because she was strong, careful, valued, and lucky. And because her people cared for her even when she could no longer hunt or gather. That's not a miracle. That's humanity. If this video changed how you see prehistoric life and human resilience, hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations of how our ancestors actually lived. Write in the comments, what do you think was the hardest part of reaching old age in 10,000 BC? The physical dangers? The social challenges? The constant uncertainty? And remember, you carry the genes of people who survived all of this. Your ancestors lived through childhood diseases, hunted dangerous animals, endured harsh winters, and some lived to be elders. That resilience is in you. Thanks for watching.